I say we go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. My name is Shelley Reed. I'm the manager of LSNTAP, and we're happy to have you here today to talk about data and get some tips and tricks and learn a little bit about what everyone is doing across the nation in their world's own data.
Great. So yeah, today I wanted to talk a little bit about key skills for data folks. I know that we all sit in different, obviously geographic areas, different types of organizations, different departments within those organizations, but there's certain things that overlap and certain things that may be specific to your position. And so I wanted to start just by sharing kind of a drafts document that I've started putting together in preparation for this meeting, and I'll try to drop that link in the chat, which always disappears when I start sharing. There it is. So basically, my kind of framing for this is a lot of our organizations don't don't have a data person and don't know what to look for, do have a data person and don't totally know what they do, or maybe are still, even if they are using their data team really well, maybe there's opportunities to improve or to streamline the ongoing development of those folks in those roles. And so I pulled this document up, but really what I would love to start with is this here. So you can see here that I put my title, my organization, and then I've made a kind of very rough breakdown of the type of work that I do, what takes up my time. So 10% of it is learning new tools or ideas. So I may be going, webinars, poking around on Google, following rabbit holes to learn new things. Another 10% is, listening for needs. So that's engaging with the program side team, not asking them to come to me in this case, but going to them. Internal documentation and training. 40% is kind of the core of, I think, what people think my work is, which is actually building new tools or new projects or modifying existing tools to meet needs in a new way. 20% is going to be that maintenance, cleanup, etc. And 10% is giving back to the community. So things like this, conferences, etc. Now, these categories are ones that I entirely made up. They're not kind of categories that would work for everyone. But I would love to see in the chat or in the document, whichever is easiest, kind of your title, where in the organization you sit. Are you in IT? Are you in learning and development? Are you within the program side? Are you within grants? And then how would you break down your work? It doesn't have to be in exact percentages. But yeah, I'd love for you to start sharing that. And if it helps to just come off mute and talk about it, then I'm happy to facilitate that conversation as well.
I think some people came in after you put the link, so I've added it again in the chat.
Awesome, thank you.
And if people don't want to go to the doc or don't want to speak out, feel free to put your information in the chat and I can move it into the doc as well.
Yeah, and if you want to just share your kind of title and organization, that's also totally fine. You don't need to go into the kind of extensive breakdown. We're just kind of trying to get a sense of where folks are at and what that might look like.
I'll share. I am a new position at Atlanta Legal Aid. I'm the Community Education Outreach Coordinator, and I'm funded by 2 grants. So I break up my time based off the needs of those grants. However, I'm my own little unit, but I'm adjacent to the innovation team. So I collaborate with our legal server management system, and we're trying to be more data savvy, and that's where I was really interested in this position because I came from a master's in education research. So slowly trying to see what that means for Atlanta legal aid. So this group is really helpful to get ideas.
Oh, that's awesome. When you were hired on, what was that research background explicitly part of what they were looking for, or is it something that you kind of brought to the table and said, "Hey, I think this could be really useful"?
So one of the grants is working with a data analyst to find more pockets to target outreach that we are
Mhm.
missing in our coverage area. So that was really attractive to me with my my master's program to apply what I've learned.
Perfect. No, I think that's one of the things that is really interesting is that these kind of data focused roles um, do pop up all over the place. Sometimes they're carved out as a special kind of unique thing, and sometimes it's really embedded um, with the program side, and sometimes it's in between. And so that's really cool, and congratulations. I look forward to seeing what you do in that
Thank you.
role. Everyone else, I see some going on in the chat. I mean, on the document. Daria, thank you. I see some. Right, thanks. I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat. Oops, sorry. I'm down a little bit further. Close out my Power BI because it loves to eat my system resources. As an aside, this was an interesting project we just did. We're doing some strategic planning, and we were trying to figure out how to use how to kind of estimate what types of work folks were doing as far as direct representation, education, impact work. And so we went to Timeslip Data and did some interesting bucketing of that. Had to do a couple different layers, but really interesting to kind of see what that looks like and use that to inform where we're going. Thank you all for jumping in and contributing to this. This is super helpful. I'm curious for those of you who are not in kind of an IT department. What types of departments are you in? Grants, I know a lot of folks are there. Where else do folks typically land, or within this group, where are folks landing? Yeah, IT office. Great, we've got some consultants. Hi, Mallory.
Hi, Susan.
Yeah, for those of you wearing multiple hats, do you feel like that is helpful to you to be able to kind of translate between the two kind of roles? Or is it just a lot to manage both at once?
I'll say that I am having a hard time today. I'm sorry, I'm not following along. I am on several different projects, and I have multiple hats, and sometimes I go from one software to another within an hour, and I really need to manage my time better, where I can have maybe a whole half day just doing Power BI, or another half day doing SurveyMonkey, instead of, going back and forth. But sometimes there are fires that, come up and you need to support your team, right? So that's what I'm having a moment right now where I'm like, oh, I know I have this work plan bulleted out and I can just copy and paste, but so that's what I'm doing right now, is like, I'm gonna offer this to you better, better than just like, this is my name.
No, thank you. Yeah, no, it seems like such an interesting balance of like, um, if you bring folks over from the program side to the data side, or if you have folks that are kind of juggling lots of things, there can be some synergy in that, right? Because you already know kind of the way things work, and maybe some opportunities for improvement, and you can speak the language, which is honestly a huge thing of being able to communicate in a way that the program teams understand. Um, but I think that, if you've got folks that are coming in with existing data skills, then they can really bring a lot of tools that maybe the legal aid world is not as familiar in yet. But then you have to learn the language, right? And so those interpersonal skills become such a hugely important thing. Um, so while folks are doing this, I wanted to kind of think through, how do we apply this for our organizations? So if folks are looking to hire another data person, or perhaps hire a first data person, um, what should they be looking for? I was having this conversation with a few folks who weren't able to make it today, and one of the things that they were talking about was, first of all, communication, and being able to translate their work into terms that the program teams can understand, and vice versa. But they also talked about the importance of not looking too specifically for a hard skill set, a specific tool, right? So, for example, one of the examples I gave was legal server, right? Outside of legal aid, you're not going to find legal server experts, but you probably will find folks who have experience in some variation of a customer relations management software, a case management software, something like that. And if not that, then some kind of relational database. And those are very translatable skills. But again, if you're COO, CEO, executive director that's looking to hire, they may not know that those things overlap. And so another thing that I've put on this document, and I'll not take a lot of time on it today, although I will leave this open for editing for a minute, is kind of, what are the categories of systems that we most often use for legal aid and data. And so Office email platforms, most of us are on kind of Microsoft 365, Google 3G Suite. There may be some others, probably for the smaller orgs. Case management systems, we've got the big three, but I know that there are others as well. A lot of different phone systems. I listed several here that were on a recent LSNTAP list kind of conversation, but again, I know there's a lot more. And really part of what I put this on here for is, again, to kind of help managers or hiring professionals translate, right? If someone says they have experience working with Nextiva, they can probably also work with RingCentral. There'll be some learning that they'll need to do, but at least there's some concepts that will overlap. Similarly, if you've worked with ArcGIS, you can probably pick up QGIS. If you've worked with any computer programming language, you'll have a little bit easier time picking up any of the other ones than if you're totally starting from scratch. So this is just kind of for my reference, but again, if you think that there are tools in here that are common that folks might want to look out for as skills to bring to the table, then feel free to add. And if there's anything on here that I'm missing, so I put AI as kind of a question mark of, is this something that we're looking for as an existing skill at this point? What would that even look like? How would that translate? And then other data management tools. I'm not personally very familiar with a lot of the more statistics-focused data tools, but I know that they're out there. So feel free to add on there if you would like. But coming back in here again, thank you. This is such a huge resource to be able to to have for folks of just ideas and examples of how you can put folks integrate data into your organization and where you can put those folks kind of within your existing work. So kind of getting down to, I don't know how to facilitate this best. Whether you go through these questions here, or if you want to just kind of talk through these kind of core responsibilities lists and say which of these are generally relevant to all of us and what am I missing? Yeah, let me drop that link back in. Sorry. It's one downside about Zoom is you don't get the link if you don't get the link, you didn't get it. So there we go. Thank you, Shelley. So yeah, I guess I'll start here because I think this is more interesting to me. Does this core responsibilities list generally track for all of you, or is there anything on here that you're like, well, I can see where it would be relevant for someone, but it's not really something that I do? I'll drop that in the chat as well, just in case there are folks who can't see the screen. Oops.
So this is Shelby from Community Legal Aid in California. Community Legal Aid SoCal in California. One of the really important things that we have to do that I think might be specified on here is troubleshooting, because I think that that's a specific skill that might go under communications.
Does anyone second that, or feel like that's a pretty big part of your role as well? I know it's definitely a big part of mine.
I can piggyback on that. The same thing as troubleshooting or process improvement. Like we are doing it this way, we're getting what we need, but how can we do it better?
Yeah. Are there any data folks on this call who feel like process improvement is not part of your role at all? In my mind, they're two different things, but they can never, it feels like they just always overlap, because if you don't have the data, you don't know what can be improved. But has anyone's organization really broken that out into distinct roles?
So this is Angel at Legal Services of North Florida, and we definitely have the two titles. So I'm the process improvement attorney, and then Jacob's the data analyst. But I think in practice, we overlap quite a bit, because we definitely need to talk about, like if you need certain data, how to get it on legal server, or how to get it if not from legal server, right? So yeah, there is definitely a lot of overlapping and troubleshooting for sure.
Should have set a poll for this. But it looks like most of you, let me see if I can count. 1, 2. It looks like 3. Looks like management is the minority here. And non-managers are the majority. Does that seem right? I guess my question for the non-managers is, how are you able to raise the issues that you identify to the appropriate folks? Do you have clear channels for that? Are you being invited into meetings? What's that process been like for you? And how would you like it to improve?
So it's Angel again. I think, like for me, I definitely am in the manager role as the clinic director for the low income taxpayer clinic and in charge of intake, but there's really no clear direction or process as to how things actually happen. I think that's been one of the things I'm struggling with. Like, how do we get things moving?
Yeah.
This is Atticus Solomon, and I am a new data coordinator. I would agree with Angel that there does seem to be some direction, but what the appropriate direction is, depending on the issue you're bringing up, not exactly clear what those policies are.
So I'm mostly gonna kind of, let's put a new tab in here. So accessibility. Okay. So basically I want to think through like, okay, what can organizations do better to support and make the most of the data folks that they do have, whether they're kind of again tasked with that full time or whether it's part of another role. And so clear so normal, yes, okay. Clear paths or solving needs or problems. For those of you who are not in those kind of management meetings, do you feel like you have other opportunities to get the knowledge that you have to the people who need it? Or how would you like for that to happen? Would you like to be in those meetings? Do they even happen? Do they have our meetings a thing?
At least the meetings I've been in, they're kind of, it almost seems like the upper admins are not entirely clear what they want. So maybe
Mhm.
clear expectations and reasons why they need certain things. Just because something sounds interesting doesn't mean we should spend a whole lot of time getting it. That's my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And do you feel empowered in those meetings or when they make those requests to ask those follow-up questions, or is it more of a here's what I need and I need it by X date?
There's a lot of that, and then I would often kind of push back, especially since I am also in charge of intake. If they want intake to ask more questions, I'll often be like, why is this important? And because
Yes.
intake already takes forever. So if they keep adding questions and refuse to reduce the questions, it just,
Mhm.
yeah.
And then they look at your numbers and they're like, why is our intake going slower? Why are we getting fewer?
Right. And then they complain about people being on hold. And I'm like, because
Yep.
you keep asking more questions.
Yep. No, I mean, I think that's a conversation that I try to, one of the things that I always try to do at LAFLA and other places when I don't have the positional authority to make these decisions is to kind of ask questions, and I always slip in a little bit of my reasoning with the questions. And so what I'll say, hey, why do you want that question? And the reason I'm asking is I try not to ask clients any questions that are not going to immediately impact their ability to get services. And if we
Mhm.
are adding additional questions, there needs to be a benefit that I can explain to the client for why I'm asking this. And that really makes folks stop and think. And sometimes, they're like, we're doing it anyway, it's important to us. But a lot of times we can then have a conversation about, right? Like, okay, you're asking this question, but can we think a bit more and turn this into a triage tool, right? Turn this into a way to identify better ways to serve the client. And so, yeah, that kind of managing across and managing up is, I think, a very common skill that folks
Right.
in these roles develop.
Yeah, so I think I've like kind of like you asking those kind of questions, I've been slowly training them to think about it before they approach me to add more questions to either, any form, not just intake, but any form on legal server.
Yep.
Susan, this is Mallory. To build on, and I'm a consultant, so I work with a bunch of different programs, or have worked with a bunch of different programs over the last 10 years. And building on what you've been saying, and Angel, what you've been saying as well, I think that in our community, there has been a culture of leadership not involving the data or tech teams in big picture conversations. And I think that's starting to change in some places. And, and those early adopters are hopefully starting to model for others. And so I think it's important for data and tech teams to be involved at an early stage, to be part of those conversations about process or about purpose, and also just like about reasonableness of what we're saying can be produced or information data that can be shared. And there's so much value to bringing the data and tech teams in at an early stage, but I think some leaders have been slow to understand how and why that's true. And building off something you said about, legal server in particular, I think a lot of people, myself included, did not plan on becoming a legal server administrator, but just kind of got dropped into the job because of, things or strengths or interests that you've shown in other positions. And so that's both a challenge and a huge opportunity for us to recruit from within our own organizations and provide leadership opportunities to some people who wouldn't otherwise have them. But I think that when you are young and or a person of color and or a woman, it can be that much harder to feel like you're provided with the space to speak up about why your knowledge about data or tech or whatever is important to be considered when you're making those process or other big picture decisions.
Yeah, 100%. I know, kind of, I'll take a little tangent here. So there's stuff that's folks want to continue contributing to this, just put a pin in it and we'll come back. I did want to flag here that I also am wanting to build out this kind of training and development resources page here. And that's because, just like Mallory was saying, and as we've discussed here quite a bit, you don't have to be an expert in everything when you start. You're not going to be an expert in everything when you start. You might not be an expert in anything when you start. I know that, again, for me, before I started working in legal aid, had no formal training in data process improvement or any of that. I had an aptitude and I like it, right? And I think that was the really key thing that drove me into it. But for legal server specifically, right, we have the legal server help site, they have office hours, they have the listserv, they have the LIFT program that Mallory runs, and with others, they have the national trainings. And so there are all these resources for folks to be able to really thrive in these roles, even if they're not someone who would historically have considered themselves a quote unquote data person. Mallory, I know that you're talking about this at an upcoming conference. Do you want to share about that real quickly?
Yeah, thank you, Susan. So the executive director who created Susan's role, Sylvia Argueta, is on a panel with me and Marabi Madrigal from the data team at Kids in Need of Defense, or KIND. Marabi and I are the co-chairs for the Advisory Council for LIFT, which is a collaborative learning program, as Susan mentioned, focused on legal server. And then also Melissa Huerta from Neighborhood Legal Services of LA, who's held numerous roles at her organization, from receptionist to self-help center staff to paralegal to office manager, and now she's the data specialist there. And we're going to be talking about on a panel at the National Legal Aid and Defender Association conference, which is coming up in November, on how data and technology can advance your mission, enhance staff growth, and support diversity, equity, and inclusion. We'll be talking about a lot of the things that have come up here already. We'll also be talking about how things like degree requirements can be really exclusionary and are unnecessary. And we'll also be sharing job descriptions with the attendees. So our goal is for the attendees to take a broader view of who can be a great tech person or a great data person, for the attendees to think about how they should be increasing their investment, increasing resources within their organization to support data and tech, and think about how they can identify people within their own organizations to recruit for those positions. So if anybody, I'll be using this document that we're putting together to help inform our panel. But one thing that we'll specifically be sharing with attendees are a variety of job postings. So if you all are willing to share some of the job postings, either for jobs that you have posted for and have been part of hiring for, or that you responded to and now have filled that position, that would be great. And my email address is at the top of the notes or the chat, and I'll put it in again. But I'm also happy to sort of anonymize your job posting, so it doesn't have to, when we share it with others, it doesn't have to say your organization name on it. I can anonymize it so that it's a little bit more general, but people really love to have those job postings to start from. Thank you, Shelley.
Thank you.
So please, I'll send out a note closer to the conference on this list. But for those of you who are going to be at the NLADA conference in November, we'd love to see you there and hope to have a lot of audience participation. And then also for those of you, if you're executive director or deputy director, other leaders, litigation directors within your organization are going, you can forward it along to them and hopefully they'll come by.
Awesome. Thank you, Mallory. I think so much of this is, about kind of peer support, right? Of like seeing what each other is doing and being able to help each other. But again, I also want this document to be able to be used by HR directors, hiring directors, you when you're advocating for someone else to come and work with you because your workload is too big, to be able to kind of more specifically articulate what that looks like. And so this is hugely helpful. Thank you all so much. I did put a section down here of possibly helpful interview questions. And so if you had an interview question that you thought was really good when you were going through the hiring process, then feel free to drop that down here. Or if you feel like you have a question that would help someone articulate their skills in a meaningful way, or would weed out folks who maybe are not a good fit for roles like this. I know that when we've done some hiring for data related roles in the past, we've gotten some candidates with really strong technical expertise, but they weren't able to really articulate the curiosity and the mission focus that we found to be so essential in our work. And so, thank you, Valerie. So yeah, if there's anything you guys can think of here, I'm trying to again, this is kind of following on some conversations I had with folks who couldn't be here today, getting at that communication kind of element. But
Shelby had come off mute a little while ago. I wanted to circle back and see if there was
yeah, thank you.
something that that we can help Shelby with.
Oh,
And feel free to change topics. We're bouncing around.
Thank you, Shelley. So I was just going back to what Mallory was just talking about, and what you're talking about, Susan, and Angel, when she was talking about that she was the process improvement manager. I was like, that is so cool that somebody has a process improvement manager. And then Angel, you're like, oh, and I'm also the intake managing attorney at my organization. It's like, that's like a 1.5 time job being an intake manager, and then you got attached onto you the process improvement. And I am in a similar position where I'm in charge of our public grants here and was bestowed with the title of evaluation manager as part of that a few years ago. And just given the importance of this work, both at the micro level of making sure that we're reporting correctly to our funders in increasingly complex reports, and making sure that we are complying with the increasingly complex grant requirements, up to the big picture strategy of how you use evaluation and data to improve your organization. And just sort of how is the legal aid industry sort of navigating this when it kind of feels like we appreciate the importance of this, but we're under-resourcing it so much, which I guess is the story of legal aid writ large, right? But how do you decide between you need a new attorney or you want to get somebody who's going to be dedicated to data? I don't know what the right answer is, but Angel, I wanted to just say, good job. And I hope they're going to get you some help, because that sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, and I'm in charge of the low-income taxpayer clinic. So I have a question, or maybe curious how other organizations work, like in terms of hiring data specialists versus like attorneys. It seems like a lot of the grants are really focused on case, like working, opening, closing cases. So where's the funding coming from to hire like a data person or a process improvement person?
I mean, I think that's a really great question that there's not a uniform answer to, or a great answer to. I know that since I've been in my role, LAPLA has been a lot more intentional about writing kind of data and evaluation funds into grants to the extent that we have that capability. So, if we're asked for a budget, right, we can provide that, then we always put that in there. We'll also kind of shoehorn things into existing grants, right? So for example, if there's something we need to do for the organization, but it would also be useful for a specific project we can get funded, then we'll kind of take that adjacent angle. So for example, right, we want to train our staff on AI and have an AI policy. Well, we got a TIG, right, to cover building out AI tools in Legal Server, which is not specific to AI training of LAFLA, but of course we have to train staff to use these tools. And so we were able to use that to, cover a lot of my education and training and networking, and work on that policy and work on our training materials. So things like that. I think that a lot of funders are actually ahead of us on this, and we just need to connect a little bit better. So, for example, I know some of our DOJ grants, they're always, asking who's your data person, who's gonna to make sure the data is right? And so then it's just making sure you're having that conversation of, okay, we have a data person, they're gonna get funded, by this grant. And depending on how your organization structure is, it can be either a percentage of the general overhead, right, that goes into that, or it can be a line item. But that gets kind of into the weeds of how the finance team does their work.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how like small the admin team is compared to how many attorneys, paralegals, and case handlers in general there are, and how we're definitely lacking in both support, training, thinking through process, and all of that.
Pablo, I think your note taker got put on mute. We're disconnected, but yeah, no, I totally agree that most organizations that I've seen, that admin side is not as robust as I would have expected given the size of the program teams. And I think, that's a kind of upper management conversation about when you have that being the case, it doesn't mean that the admin work goes away. It just means that the program team are now doing admin work. And is that really what you want? And, could they be more effectively used doing the legal work, and less of the admin work, and what would it take to get from where you are to where you want to be. I know those are very, very much ongoing conversations, at LAFLA, with upper management, with union staff, to figure out, what, on the one hand, the union staff have said in the past, why are you hiring so many admins? We want to hire more attorneys. But then of course, the flip side of that is, why aren't we getting the support that we need, right? And so being able to connect the dots of causation, right? Of like, here's what does this, here's what does that, how do we meet everyone's needs? Tangent, but very related. I think something we've all been part of.
Susan, I just want to chime in support of something you said about adding budget for tech and data staff into grants, especially bigger ones or ones with, pretty intense reporting requirements. I think it's really important, and not everybody's going to say yes to it, but I think a lot of people aren't even asking to have any of that covered in their grants. And adding it to the budget is a great way to start the conversation with the funders.
Awesome. Besides that money, which if you guys have ideas on how to get that those budgets in there, please interrupt me and chime in, because I think that's top of mind for a lot of folks. But besides that, kind of extra funding, extra personnel, what else could your organizations do to make your job easier, or increase the impact of the work that you're doing?
So I've been really diving into this idea of having structures for productivity, like what does a project look like and who's accountable. I think there's a lot of gaps as to what's the goal of the project, like really breaking down the whole project process and having clarity as to who's responsible, when is it due, is it urgent, and that kind of thing, and really building a system out to manage, like currently I must have at least 20 plus projects going on. And how do I manage that? And is it like a realistic expectation for me to manage all that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that goes to kind of the project managers group that works, that's under LSNTAP as well, right? But you can't do project management by yourself, right? Like, even if you have all the tools and you can put all the kind of structure in place, if folks don't say, okay, yes, you've marked me as the person who's responsible for this task, I'm going to take that responsibility, then, it's just a piece of paper. But it can still provide, communication support, right? Of you being able to say, here's the universe of what needs to happen for this to succeed. Here's the parts of it that I can do. Here's the rest. Who should be doing this bit? So. Do you all work closely with your communications teams to do kind of more external facing stuff, or to do like internal newsletters? Or is there kind of a divide there? Like, not a ton of folks.
I can say a definite huge divide.
Yeah.
I think communications for the most part wants data and information, but they are not really collaborating with us.
Yeah, and it can be hard if they don't understand it, right? I
Right.
think that's they ask for like this breakdown, and you're like, okay, here's the breakdown, but here's the caveats. And like, I don't know what that means. So we got really lucky recently with a communications hire that is working much more closely with me and others, and it's nice to have that initiative coming from that side. Not that our other hires haven't done it. I think she just has more experience working with data folks, and so knows a little bit more what to ask for. Oh, I don't want to take up time just monologuing. I could have been a comedian, and I would have been a very bad one, and I'd be starving. But with that said, is there anything else related to this or unrelated that folks had questions about and wanted to bring up in this space? Yeah, Randall.
We've talked about job postings here and there. Is there a resource for a person who is looking to relocate into a new job? Where do they go to find jobs in this particular field?
Shelley, I think you may have something to share in that regard.
So when we have postings that come through our listserv, we put them right on our website. So lsntap.org. There's a page for jobs and RFPs. A to J Jobs is a website for legal aid organizations and other nonprofits and things. It's run by a gentleman who works for a legal aid organization down in Tampa. Those would be the first places that I would visit if I was looking for a job.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
And
another
I would have to say, visiting legal aid organizations' own websites. There's about, I think 130 LSC funded legal aid organizations, but hundreds more non LSC funded organizations that are doing very similar work if you want to stay in this kind of community. I mean, like, I think there's it's like close to 100 organizations just in DC. I mean, it's tons. So,
I also
you
would
know,
encourage folks to make use of maybe slightly less intentional use, but make use of things like conferences. So if you're able to go to a conference kind of with your existing job, and talk to folks that are in the region that you want to go to, you'll get a lot more of like the informal on the ground knowledge about, yeah, we are hiring, probably we're not hiring, maybe someone's looking to retire, maybe someone's looking to move up to a new role, and they would know that and be able to give you that information. And even if they don't have something right now, being able to have those people as contacts, people that you know in those organizations already that, when you do apply would be able to vouch for you, is, good networking, first of all, just to have that base of folks, and secondarily can be really helpful to go in not totally cold. Same thing with this listserv and with others. If you see someone post from an organization that you're potentially curious about, I personally would not be offended at all if someone emailed and reached out and asked, hey, like, I'm looking to move to the area. Do you know of anything open, or like what, do you know what your organization's plans are? I personally would not be offended at all by that. And I would not think that others would be. So it's up to your comfort level, but I would encourage you to assume that folks are generally eager to help.
In terms of conferences, I go to the Legal Server Training and ITC. Are there any others that you would suggest?
I mean, I feel like ITC is the big one. Which can also make it it can make it hard and hard to network because there's so many folks, but there's also so many folks. So there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah.
the kind of bigger non-tech focused ones, the NLADAs and the Equal Justice Conference, for example, can be a good one, especially if you're wanting to network with like managements and directors and folks who might, you know, be making those decisions about who to hire. I'm trying to think of any other tech focused ones, and I can think of
NTEN.
some, but they're not legal aid. I'm sorry.
Yeah, NTEN is not legal
Yeah.
aid focused, but they have some pretty good job listings on their website as well.
Yeah.
And their conference is generally good. I just don't know how much data they focus on, but they do have independent courses.
And what was the name?
NTEN, NTEN. Here, I'll drop the link in the chat.
And it's a great resource in general. They're like Shelley said, they're focused on nonprofits, tech more broadly. But sometimes legal aids forget that we're nonprofits as well as being law firms, and there's a lot in that space that we can learn from.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Any other topics? All right, cool. Well, you know where to find us all. You know where the listserv is. The recording and the doc will be distributed on that the listserv again, and probably Shelley, I might just send it around to the whole NTEN listserv once we get it cleaned up a bit. But thank you all, and have a great rest of your Monday.
And just to remind everyone, we do not have a meeting next month because it's a holiday on the day we normally meet. So our next meeting would be the second Monday in December. So have a great day.
Thanks, all. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.